going into a women's thing. Our next keynote speaker is Fibæk. She's a co-founder of the Institute of Integrative Hormone Therapy and a co-author of a bestseller. Caroline combines both traditional and alternative approaches to hormone health. Today she will discuss the vital role of sleep quality in sustainable high performance and overall well-being. A warm welcome to Caroline.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to see that there's also some men in here. I have some few small tidbits for you as well, but it's mainly going to be about women today. And can you all hear me? It's like the first time I've ever tried like a silent talk. That's good. It's like starting a Zoom call. Yeah, but today I get to wear pants as well. So today we're going to talk about how we get to understand the language of the female body, because that's what I work with. I work with hormones, and that is like the biochemical messengers, the biochemical communication inside the body. Men have hormones as well, and we're going to get back to that. But today we're going to focus mainly on women and look how this communication works through the lens of the menstrual cycle, how we can use this information that our body gives us each month. So that may sound a little bit out there and a little bit hippie, but given that if you saw the last talk about psychedelics, I'm assuming that my talk is not going to be that far out there. And actually it's pretty recognized that you can use a menstruation as a vital sign. And a vital sign is like measuring your pulse and your temperature and your heartbeat, your heart rate. And in the same way, you can use a menstruation, not just the period, but all of the menstrual cycle as a vital sign to see if your body is functional as it should be. And this is a committee opinion. Menstruation in girls and adolescents using the menstrual cycle as a vital sign. It's from the Association of American Gynecologists. And it says, using the menstrual cycle as an additional vital sign adds a powerful tool to the assessment of normal development and the exclusion of pathological conditions. By including an evaluation of the menstrual cycle as an additional vital sign, clinicians reinforces its importance in assessing overall health status. Just as abnormal blood pressure, heart rate, or respiratory rate may be the key to the diagnosis of potentially serious health conditions, identification of abnormal menstrual patterns through adolescence may permit early identification of potential health concerns for adulthood. But do you really know what your period and your menstruation is telling you? I'm asking just the females here because I see all of you men here. And this talk is definitely most for women. But men can also learn hopefully a lot from this, because all of you here probably know a woman, and all of you here hopefully have a sister or partner or daughter. So this is also vital information for you. And if not so, all of us came from a mother. We all came from a woman, and we're all the results of this menstrual cycle. So let's all get to know this a little bit better. Before we get into the nerdy stuff about the hormones and everything, I'm going to talk a little bit about a term called bikini medicine. I don't know if you've ever heard about that. Bikini medicine is not like with all of the fancy gadgets and beauty clinics out here. It's not like a Brazilian wax or anything. Bikini medicine is the term we use when we describe the gender bias in medicine. When we exclude women from studies and statistics, and when we exclude women to be only what is covered by a bikini. So women's hormones is not just something for a gynecologist to be interested in. Women's hormones are sex hormones. They affect everything in our body. They affect our brain, they affect our bones, they affect our skin, they affect our vision. They affect our immune system. And they even affect our mood and who we are attracted to. So that's a lot. It's not just about reproduction. But yet, we only care about health in women and gynecology when we're trying to conceive or when we're going through menopause. Sorry. So why is knowledge about the female hormonal system so important? It is because we're twice as likely to develop anxiety and depression as men are. We have over 3 times the risk of developing an autoimmune disorder, like multiple sclerosis, like Hashimoto's, like lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, like celiac disease. We are 4 times more often diagnosed with migraines and headaches. We develop meningioma, which is the most common form of a brain tumor, 4 times more often than men do. We have longer and more severe anaphylactic shocks than men do. We are 50% more likely to experience burnout. And 43% of women leaders are burned out compared to only 31% of men at their level. 55% of people with autoimmune diseases are women. And 85% of women have experienced hormonal imbalances like PMS, excessive bleeding, menstrual cramps, the gist. And the majority of drugs are tested primarily on young men, but the majority of consumers of those drugs are middle-aged women. And now we know that our hormones affect everything. It's not just like they said in the 80s, the little difference between men and women. No, our hormones affect everything, even how we break down and activate or metabolize medicine. That's why most women have more problems when they take medicine than we have good. So we need to look at women's hormonal imbalances as far more than just a matter of reproduction. So are you all ready to learn about your menstrual superpowers? Or your women's superpowers? Yeah. Before we get down to the hormones, we need to look at where we produce the hormones. We need a little anatomy lesson. And it has nothing to do with mirrors and looking down there, don't worry. I drew this for you. This is our uterus. It's a little bit weird there, uterus. It's a uterus with fallopian tubes and your ovaries and a cervix and a vagina. I don't know if there's like a laser here I can point it. No, okay, it doesn't work. But the ovaries is what we're primarily going to be looking at today. So this is an ovary. And inside your ovaries, all of the magic happens. Well, I thought I could use a laser and like pinpoint, but you have the primordial follicle, which we're all born with, like the primordial follicles. This is where the eggs rest inside when we don't use them. And then there's a maturation stage, and they develop to the primary follicle, and this maturation from the primary follicle until you ovulate is about 3 months, like 100 days. So you have your primary follicle, your primary oocyte, the granulosa cell, the anthracal follicle, and then the Graafian follicle. And the Graafian follicle is really interesting. Of course, it's named by a man. All your anatomy in women's anatomy is named by men. But the Graafian follicle is where the follicle gets receptors from hormones from our brain. So the brain can send signals to the ovary, not to overreact, but to produce an ovulation and set the egg free. And then you have the ovulation, yay, because that's where you make the progesterone. And after the ovulation, which is kind of, most people think that menstruation is like the central part of the menstrual cycle, but maybe it should really be called the ovulation cycle, because the ovulation and what happens after that is kind of the really good stuff. So after you have the ovulation, the egg travels down the uterus, and if you have intercourse, this is when you can get pregnant. But inside the ovary, you have this follicle that the egg were inside. It's called now the corpus luteum, the empty follicle. And it will grow really, really quickly. It's kind of the fastest growing tissue in the body. And it requires a lot of energy, so we can eat a bit more. that explains a lot if you have a period. But this is where you produce the progesterone. So you have two main hormones that are produced here. You have the estrogen, which is produced in a follicle, and then you have the progesterone, which is produced in the corpus luteum. And then if you don't get pregnant, the corpus luteum will deteriorate and become the corpus albicans, and then totally deteriorate. And this is a small graph of the menstrual cycle. On the top, you see the hormones that come from the brain, which are our overall functioning of the hormone system. And then you see the ovulation and the phases of the follicle. And then you see the primary female hormones, the estrogen and the progesterone. And you see the uterus and the uterine lining and how it grows during the menstrual cycle. And then at the bottom, you see our basal body temperature, because that rises in the second phase of the menstrual cycle, during the luteal phase, because progesterone affects the basal body temperature. This is a bit bigger and more easy to see. So on the top, you have LH and FSH. So in the beginning of the menstrual cycle starts on day 1, which is the first day you bleed. And it starts at a low point with everything, and we're tired and sluggish. And then FSH starts to rise. And FSH is a brain hormone sent down to the follicles, and then they start producing estrogen. And that estrogen makes your uterine lining grow and makes it more fertile if you get pregnant, but it also affects all of your body. So your brain chemistry, your neurons, your bones, your skin, everything. And then when the body has enough estrogen, your brain is like a thermometer. It can sense, okay, now we have enough estrogen to go about our business. And then it releases LH, luteinizing hormone. And that's the signal down to your ovaries, to the Graafian follicle, to release the egg. And then we ovulate. And after ovulation, our progesterone rises. But there's 2 spikes and falls of estrogen during the menstrual cycle. And that's kind of important if you have like menstrual migraines or headaches, because this spike can affect your histamine levels. And that's the mediator of migraines and cyclical headaches. And in the last bit of the luteal phase, you see the progesterone rises, and then both of the hormones fall. And that's quite important, because those rises and falls, that unpredictability that they call it in our hormones, is what excludes women from so many studies in medicine, because they call us unpredictable. Well, this is kind of one of the most predictable things that we have. So the role of estrogen is actually, we have 3 types of estrogen. We have estradiol and estrone and estriol. Actually, we have more. We also have estrogen metabolites, but that's a whole nother talk. And the estrogen is what gives us our secondary sex characteristics, like forms us, shapes us like women, gives us breasts and bum and everything in between. Whap! Breast and bum, and then I lose my clothes. Not on purpose, though. But it also affects our mood and our energy. It affects our energy levels. It affects serotonin in our brain. It inhibits the breakdown of serotonin, the happy hormone in the brain. Fun bit is, though, that chocolate has some of the same effects on the brain. Yay! It also affects pain and inflammation because estradiol is an anti-inflammatory. But when it drops, we become more inflammatory. And you saw that we had these 2 drops of estrogen during the menstrual cycle, so you become more inflammatory. And then when you go into perimenopause and menopause, it's a whole other talk, much more inflammation. It affects our sleep because serotonin is converted into melatonin, our sleep hormone. So stabilizing serotonin also affects our sleep. And it affects all of our physiology. It supports our cardiovascular health, it improves the blood vessels, the flexibility of our blood vessels, and it reduces cholesterol levels. So a lot going on with estrogen. And of course, it's the same for progesterone. So this is what you produce during the later part of the menstrual cycle after ovulation. Of course, you do also produce 10%, but in the adrenals. So the primary role of progesterone is that it stabilizes the uterine lining so that you don't start spotting too early, for instance. And it makes it fertile so that you can, if you have an egg, if you get pregnant, it can grow here. But it also regulates your body temperature. The basal temperature rises 0.3 to 0.4 degrees after ovulation, and it's supposed to stay high during all of the luteal phase. If it falls, it's a sign that you're not producing enough progesterone. It affects your mood and your energy. It has a calming effect when you're pregnant. Anybody been pregnant in here? Yeah, I've done it 3 times. But progesterone is kind of responsible for that calming effect. You sleep a lot better. Everything is kind of, as long as you're done throwing up and stuff like that. But it affects your brain via the same system as Valium. You know Valium? Yeah, the sedative. So it makes you more groovy and everything is okay. But in some women, it can also lead to depression and mood disorders. But generally, it should make you less irritable and make you have less PMS. It is an antidiuretic, so it prevents water retention. If you gain weight just before your period starts, it's because of the drop in progesterone. And it affects your sleep because it has an effect on a GABA receptor like Valium has. So it affects your sleep, so you could potentially sleep better when you have more progesterone. And it also prevents cancer of the endometrial lining. So estrogen and progesterone are like yin and yang. They have to be in equal par levels to function properly. Unfortunately, a lot of stuff can affect this cycle. And we're going to get back to what affects this cycle. But the main aspect of it is that a lot of us start producing more estrogen or normal levels of estrogen, and we inhibit the ovulation because stress, amongst others, inhibit ovulation. And then we get the whole hormonal mess. But we also have testosterone. Most people think that testosterone is this male hormone, and it is. It's responsible for the male characteristics. But females also produce testosterone, and it's also really important for females. It rises briefly during ovulation. And that's funny because it's testosterone that's responsible for our libido. So it increases our sex drive right around ovulation. That's how they get us. And it increases our mood and energy. So you have more self-confidence. You could have better workouts at this time of your period. It has an effect on pain and inflammation because it affects the muscle mass and your strength. So you could do a lot of muscle weightlifting here. And it has no direct effect on our sleep like progesterone and estradiol has, but it does give us more energy and more drive, so it can potentially inhibit our sleep. So, women are cyclical, but are we unpredictable? Is that a reason to exclude us from most studies? No, definitely not. Men, on the other hand, their testosterone levels are affected by so many things. Like when they become fathers, their testosterone levels are affected. Of course, age affects us, watching sports, and whether or not he finds the nurse drawing his blood for the testosterone test sexy or not. And actually, men have also a cycle. It's just that they have a diurnal cycle, so their testosterone levels rise in the morning and then they fall in the evening. That's also a cycle. It's a linear cycle. But I'd call this unpredictable. Did you also know that crying females actually makes the testosterone levels drop in men? Yeah. Of course, also, if you're on the pill, the oral birth control, p-pille in Danish, you don't have a cycle. You don't produce progesterone, you don't produce estrogen. You have a chemically induced bleed, that's all. You don't produce your own hormones. So what does the optimal period look like? For the first thing, you have a bleed that lasts for 2 to 7 days. You don't have any spotting, because that's a sign of an inhibited ovulation. You, on average, bleed about 3 tablespoons. I know that sounds like only a little bit, and if you've ever had a period, you feel like that's a lot more. But it actually isn't that much that we bleed. But if you do bleed more than 5 tablespoons, it's considered a heavy period, and you should have that checked upon. If you bleed below 25 milliliters, it's a scanty menstruation, it's too little, and that could be a sign that you also have inhibited ovulation, but also produce too little estradiol. Heavy periods are often a sign that we do not ovulate. So there's not being enough progesterone produced to stabilize the uterine lining, and it just keeps on growing. And then you're not supposed to have a lot of pain. You're not supposed to be in cramps or stay at home from work or take painkillers or faint. I have patients that come to me because they faint or they stay in bed for 3 days every month with a migraine. You're not supposed to have all of this. You're supposed to have a little bit of a murmur. That's completely normal, but not pain, and it shouldn't be debilitating. If it is, you need to seek help. Nobody should have to suffer. So when you check your cycle and your period, the most important thing for female health and longevity is, do you ovulate? Yeah, do you ovulate? So how do you know if you have an ovulation? You can spot an ovulation and the rise in progesterone with monitoring your morning temperature, because it should always rise in the luteal phase 0.3 to 0.4 degrees and stay that high until a couple of days before your period, when it drops again. That's a sign that you have enough progesterone. Also, all of the secondary signs, no pain, not a lot of pain anyway, no spotting. Your mood shouldn't be that affected. You shouldn't definitely not be depressed. But there will also be some changes in the cervical fluid, the secretion from the cervix, which you can see on this slide. If you see what's in your trousers, which we should do every day, look in your trousers, look at your poo every day. That's a really good health check. But this cervical fluid should be kind of stiff most of your cycle. That's the sign that there's no progesterone in your body, or only a little bit. But then, when you became fertile, that one day that you were fertile, it will become like egg yolk, not egg yolk, egg white. It will become stringy, and you can kind of stretch it. That's fertile slime. So you can kind of monitor what's going on in your cycle and in your hormones by just tracking your morning temperature and seeing the changes in the secretions from your cervix. Isn't that amazing? And then the most important thing that you have to do is your female body requires a lot of nurturing. And now I know that we're here for longevity, and you can track kind of everything here, and there's gadgets, and you can have your VO2 max tested and everything. That's amazing. But what we need to talk more about is that the female body needs nurturing, especially during the different cycles of the menstrual cycle, the different phases. So if you could start living just a little bit more following your chronobiology, following the menstrual phases, and kind of listening to your body, instead of just pacing through life and taking painkillers and drinking coffee when you don't have energy, you could actually produce so much more during the right phases of your menstrual cycle, because those hormones, they make you more productive and more creative, and we need to harness this intelligence from the cycle, the CI. There's so much AI here, let's get some more CI, cyclical intelligence. So you need to nourish the menstrual phase when you bleed from day 1 to day 7. Tend to yourself. Don't just take painkillers if you're in pain. Stay in bed for when you need it, if it's possible. And if it's not possible, at least don't be social. Don't socialize, don't go out, don't go on a treadmill because you need to work out and lose those extra pounds from fluid retention. Do that in the later phases. In the follicular phase from day 8 to 14, that's when you socialize. That's when estradiol goes high and you're a lot more social and you're better at performing. And then when your testosterone rises, just when you ovulate, you have so much more energy, and your muscle mass will grow faster and more effectively. So in your luteal phase, after you ovulate, you have the progesterone and that calming effect, and then you plan and you rest. And then in the premenstrual phase, you're more creative, but you're also more laid back and withdrawn, so you need to rest in this cycle. But we all need to learn, all women, but also all men, how to harness the intelligence of the cycle. But we also need nutrition. I always say nourishment, but that's so much more than just nutrition and vitamins. But we need enough calories. So I have a lot of clients these days that get far too little calories and far too little carbohydrates, and that affects ovulation, okay? So stop dieting. Start eating proper foods, start eating real protein, starchy carbohydrates, and lots of vegetables and fruits and berries, but don't diet. And the ovaries need some specific nutrients. We need 750 milligrams of vitamin C, because the follicular fluid is actually the most vitamin C rich tissue in the whole body. Because ovulation is growing, is this tissue growing so fast within the corpus luteum, and everything with a great energy production and expenditure produces a lot of free radicals. And if you produce too many free radicals, your corpus luteum will deteriorate too early, and you don't get the power from the progesterone. But there are studies showing that 750 milligrams of vitamin C will normalize the luteal phase length. Also vitamin D, iodine. The breasts and the ovaries are actually the tissues in the female body that has the most iodine, except from the thyroid. And CoQ10. And also, you need to have your thyroid checked, because your thyroid also controls your ovulation. So the primary takeaway from all of this is you need to know your biology, your feminine biology. And I want to round up with citation from Rupi Kaur stating that what is the greatest lesson a woman could learn? That since day one, she's already had everything she needs within herself. It is the world that convinced her she did not. Thank you.
Caroline, we're almost undressed your back. I'm so sorry. If people have any questions, where can they find you?
Well, I have a little stall over here at the book area, and you're always welcome to come see me if you want. I have books there as well. And yes, I'll answer questions.
Super. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Please stay. We have the last speaker right now, actually a fast swift here. So the next keynote speaker is Laura Avenius, founder and CEO of Audison. Laura will explore the science behind binaural beats and how personalized music can optimize individual performance and well-being.